The new Bureau of Ocean Energy Management will be responsible for managing development of the nation's offshore resources. This involves ensuring that the environment is protected and that the nation's offshore energy resources, including oil, gas, and renewable resources, are developed wisely, economically, and in the country's best interests. The new Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, or BSEE, will independently and rigorously enforce safety and environmental regulations. Now, over the past many months, we have been engaged in a thorough and comprehensive analysis to ensure that we address the structural and conflict of interest problems that existed in the former MMS, and to plan for the orderly establishment of the new bureaus. We have worked with and received advice from leading experts in government transformations and examined closely the offshore regulatory regimes of other nations, including the UK and Norway. We also have considered and will continue to bear in mind the recommendations of the President's Commission, which has done its own analysis of these issues. One of the important steps in our planning and analysis was to ensure that we can implement these changes while minimizing the disruptions to the Bureau's daily operations. We did this by discussing the reorganization with employees throughout BOEMR, our current organization. We received their input, collected and analyzed data relating to the Bureau's processes, systems, and regulatory metrics, and developed a number of alternative models and options for restructuring and reforming the Bureau. This work has been painstaking and time-consuming, but it has been essential to making informed decision-making regarding the transformation of the current Bureau into the two new agencies. I want to highlight a couple of the more significant changes we are making that may be of considerable interest to you because they promote the principles of independence, development of rigorous and thorough science, and they advance safety and environmental protection. We have separated resource management from safety oversight. This allows permitting engineers and inspectors who are central to overseeing safe operations greater independence, more budgetary autonomy, and clearer missions and leadership focus. Our goal is to create a tough-minded but fair regulator that can effectively keep pace with the risks of offshore drilling and will promote the development of safety cultures in offshore operators. Next, we provide a structure that ensures sound environmental reviews are conducted and that the potential environmental effects of proposed operations are given appropriate weight in making resource management decisions in BOEM. This is to ensure that leasing and plan approval activities are properly balanced. These processes must be both rigorous and efficient so that operations can go forward in a timely way and with a complete understanding of their potential environmental impacts, as well as with confidence that appropriate mitigations against those potential environmental effects are in place. We're also strengthening the role of environmental review and analysis in both organizations through various structural and organizational mechanisms. Those include the following steps: the creation of a first-ever Chief Environmental Officer in BOEM. This person will be responsible for ensuring that environmental concerns are appropriately balanced in leasing and planning decisions and for helping set the scientific agenda relative to our oceans. This is a new, high-profile, and extremely important position. I'm very excited about it. We hope and expect it will attract top-flight talent. In addition, we're going forward with a separation of the environmental review from the leasing program in BOEM's regional offices. We are creating a new plan approval process in BOEM, and we are working to develop for the first time a brand new environmental compliance and enforcement function which will reside in BSEE. And finally, we are strengthening as a national level priority the review and enforcement of oil spill response plans, which will be carried out in BSEE. Now, these reforms are in general alignment with the President's Commission's recommendations. And as we move forward with implementing these important and enormous changes, we will continue to take the Commission's recommendations into account in designing the final structure of and interactions between BOEM and BSEE within the Department of the Interior. Let me turn next to describing another important initiative we're pursuing. One of the guiding principles of our reform agenda for offshore energy development is a fundamental change in the approach to decision-making, which includes a renewed commitment to developing thorough, credible, and unfiltered scientific data as the foundation for our work and our decisions. Over the past few decades, as industry sought new productive discoveries, sought to increase domestic oil and gas supplies, and provide the country with greater energy independence, oil and gas development moved farther and farther offshore. Important science has always been conducted and has been involved in these developments. But we have concluded from the reviews of the Presidential Commission, as well as those we've conducted internally, that our scientific community within the former MMS has not always had a strong enough voice. We are changing that. This past September, Secretary Salazar issued a secretarial order establishing a scientific integrity policy for the department. My senior science advisor, Alan Thornhill, who is here today, played a leading role in drafting that policy, and we as a Bureau are wholeheartedly embracing its principles. Scientific and scholarly information considered in our decision-making must be sound, it must be of the highest quality, and it must be the product of rigorous scientific and scholarly processes. Nothing less will do. To achieve those goals, we must cultivate and reinforce a culture of scientific integrity. This means that our employees, political and career, must never suppress or alter, without new scientific or technological evidence, scientific or technical findings or conclusions. Never, period. Further, employees will not be coerced to alter or censor scientific findings, and they will be protected if they uncover and report scientific misconduct. Now, this is not about finding fault with the past, because the truth is that the agency's scientific work has in many instances been unfairly maligned. It is instead a strong commitment and prescription for the future. Now, this also means we have to devote greater resources to and elevate the role of our scientists. As I mentioned earlier, we are for the first time establishing the position of a Chief Environmental Officer for BOEM. This person will be empowered at the national level to make decisions and final recommendations when leasing and environmental program directors cannot reach agreement. The Chief Environmental Officer also will be a major player in setting the scientific agenda for the nation's oceans. And by standing up an entirely new environmental compliance function for BSEE, we are providing for the first time regulatory oversight focused on the environment. As many of you know, we are in the midst of a review of our application of NEPA, including in particular the use of categorical exclusions. We have obtained comments on our NEPA policy, and we are in the process of reviewing and analyzing the comments we've received. We are working closely with the Council on Environmental Quality on this evaluation. In the meantime, we have announced a policy that will require that site-specific environmental assessments be conducted, as opposed to the categorical exclusion reviews performed in the past, for all deepwater drilling operations. Those environmental assessments will be conducted for all new and revised exploration and development plans in deepwater. For those who might now be thinking that the pendulum is swinging too far to the other side, we believe that's not the case. We are mindful of the fact that industry must continue developing the energy resources that exist offshore. This development is crucial to the economy, to employment, and to energy independence. We are striving to ensure an appropriate balance between the imperatives of energy development and awareness of the potential environmental effects of energy development, and to ensure that appropriate measures are taken to protect against those effects. Creating and maintaining a culture of scientific integrity will enable us to make those decisions with greater confidence that we will be able to pursue energy development while having a full science-based understanding of the risks posed by that activity and what can and should be done to reduce those risks. Now, I've discussed so far some of the reforms that we are pursuing to improve the effectiveness of government oversight of offshore energy development and drilling. I've discussed those many times in recent weeks. My view is that those changes are both substantial and necessary. But as the Commission's report makes abundantly clear, industry must change as well. My agency has a clear and important role in helping to spur that change. And we are doing so through the promulgation of new prescriptive regulations to bolster safety and to enhance the evaluation and reduction of environmental risks. We have raised the bar already for safety equipment and environmental safeguards in the drilling and production stages of offshore operations, and we will continue to do so in an open and transparent way in the coming months and years. We've also introduced for the first time performance-based standards similar to those used by regulators in the North Sea. We have done all this through the development and implementation of 2 new rules for drilling and workplace safety announced last fall that raise standards for the oil and gas industry's operations on the Outer Continental Shelf, and through certain notices to lessees that provide additional guidance to operators on how to comply with existing regulations. Now, as you can see, as you can hear, we have already put in place significant pieces of our comprehensive reform agenda, but our work is far from complete. The technology associated with offshore drilling will continue to evolve, as will the complexities and risks of those operations, particularly in frontier environments such as ultra-deep water and the Arctic. We will proceed through the normal notice and comment rulemaking process to implement further safety measures, including features of the next generation of subsea containment equipment such as blowout preventers, which we're all now familiar with, and remotely operated vehicles. As we've already stated, the Bureau will also promulgate additional workplace safety reforms through the rulemaking process, including requirements for independent third-party verification of operators' workplace safety or SEMS programs. We also will continue to evaluate the regulatory standards used by other countries to ensure that the standards applied in the U.S. waters, as well as the agency that enforces those standards, are world-class. These are among the many issues discussed in the Commission's report, and the Commission provides useful insights about these issues. We can no longer accept the view that the appropriate response to a rapidly evolving, developing, and changing industry, which employs increasingly sophisticated technologies, is for the regulatory framework and the applicable rules to remain unchanged for extended periods of time. Over time, the regulatory framework and the specific requirements must keep up with advances in the industry and a pace of industry ambitions to drill in deeper water in geological formations that have greater pressures. We will continue to analyze information that becomes available, and we will implement reforms necessary to make offshore oil and gas production safer, smarter, and with stronger protections for workers and for the environment. In developing these reforms, we will balance the need for regulatory certainty, the importance of which we well recognize, against the need to act on new insights and adapt to changing technology. And importantly, the processing of drilling permit applications and proposed drilling plans will not be delayed while these additional reforms are developed. As you and I both know, we can always do better, and that we must always remain open to improvements in our regulations to develop the necessary culture of safety. In the past, industry has in many instances reflexively opposed new regulations. Some important episodes of that are detailed in the Commission's report. That kind of reflexive opposition is no more responsible than regulating for the sake of regulating. We must strike a new balance that fully involves industry in the regulatory process, but recognizes the need for us to exercise independent judgment. Our challenge in the months and years ahead is to ensure that we do not once again become complacent, but rather that we continue to make progress in developing state-of-the-art safety, containment, and response capabilities.